want to talk a little bit more about test administration and what factors influence test administration. So let's start by kind of exploring these relationships at an overview perspective. So one thing that we have to consider is expectancy, and what that means, again, we're talking about from the tester perspective. So what expectations would you have as a tester? Have you been asked to assess a student for special education needs? That expectation is going to influence how you react to the test taker. Also, what training have you had? How much training, in what area, who did the training, all those things influence you. And then, of course, reinforcement, how you reinforce the person during the test. It's important to remain objective as possible and not lead to reinforcement beyond what the test allows for to happen. Most tests have rules that you should follow, as including words you should be using as well. In terms of the test taker, the language is a big factor for them. Do they understand what you're saying? And not only from an ethnic standpoint, if they speak Spanish as a first language and you're doing it in English, that's a factor, but also from a socioeconomic standpoint. So if you're speaking from a more affluent, higher or maybe middle class perspective, and they are from a lower socioeconomic status, they may not understand all the language you're using, as well as age. Think about that. An 8-year-old isn't going to understand what an 18-year-old is, hopefully. And then, of course, subject variables, which we touched on in the overview, which are things like, hey, does the test taker stressed out? Are they sick right now? Do they have test anxiety? Are they easily distracted with, ADHD type things? There are a lot of factors that are going on in there to them that affect things. And then, of course, factors for both of them are the relationship. So do they trust you? Why are they there? Do they want to be there? All those factors affect your relationship, and the race or ethnicity of both of you, because those things can also factor in. Now, I want to look at this from another perspective, and this is just kind of a little cartoon about communication. So if you're communicating and you're presenting a test, you're the sender, and the test taker becomes the receiver. So the way communication works is we start by encoding the message. The message is there, and then it's decoded by the receiver, right? But during the message sending period here, a lot of things are happening, right? My body language is going to affect how someone receives my message, right? I could say, hey, happy birthday. Or I could say, hey, happy birthday. Very different response, right? And my body language goes into that sarcastic second happy birthday and affects how the receiver decodes the message, which goes into as well the tone of voice. Other factors that can come into play is what kind of previous communication have we had. As we just said a minute ago, the relationship affects things. Do they know you? Do they not know you? Do they trust you? And culture affects those things as well. Some cultures are more open to trusting people of authority, others are not. Similarly, the past experience of the receiver are going to affect you in that same way. There's also the possibility that there's noise background. When I was in high school, I took the ACT test as a standardized test to see what kind of score I would get that would affect my ability to get into college. During one of my takings of this test, the kid behind me was snoring, and the the heat was broken, so it was very cold in that room. So this was acted as noise, both actual noise, but also the air conditioning affected my ability to focus, right? Or the heat, I'm sorry. And then the last thing that goes into play is the proximity. And this goes also into body language as well, where my proximity to the person, can they actually physically hear me depending on their proximity? Especially maybe they're elderly, maybe they have poor hearing, maybe they're youthful, but they also have hearing disability. That proximity is going to affect things. So when we're thinking about providing test administration, we have to think about a lot of complicated factors that can influence the effects of the study.